Ring.
Hello?
Hello, is this the Thinking Atheist?
You know what's funny is I've been sitting listening to the entire conversation. For some reason, I'm just not showing up on your switchboard. So.
Ah, well, that's Blog Talk Radio for you.
You got me.
Well, I'm sure glad you could join us. What we're doing right now is kind of an introduction with everybody. And your last video, holy moly, I mean, they're all so good, but that one about Welcome to the World was just cut to the center of all of it, I thought. And you've been a Christian for 30 years, right? Until you...
You know, my story's probably more extreme than many in the fact that, I spent my entire life, not just as a Christian, but involved heavily in the church. I went to a Christian school. I said the salvation prayer at the age of 9. I was baptized. I was a spokesperson for Youth for Christ. I was a student leader. I spent over a decade as a Christian broadcaster. I hosted a morning show. We did Christian radio, Christian music, Christian talk, Christian-focused programming. My parents are theologians. They met at a Christian university. And in fact, my mother wrote a college-level Greek New Testament study guide years ago that is still used, I think, somewhere. And so they're both master's degreed theologians. They're both very hardcore, what you might call a Christian intellectual. And I think those people do exist. There's a thinking out there that a lot of people in the faith, just because they are Christians, they're all a bunch of mouth breathers. They have no idea what they're doing, how they're living. They just want to go out and show up on your door and throw religious tracts at you. And honestly, most of the people in my circles, which are Christian circles, I mean, I'm really the only atheist in my group. I live in the buckle of the Bible Belt. They're good people. They inherited the faith of their parents. They simply were raised on a foundation where the Bible was true, and that's it. And Jesus said it, and I believe it because he said it, and I know, yes, I know, yes, I know. And they've recited that mantra their entire lives. They want to raise their families. They want to teach good morals to their kids. They want to work and be productive. They want to live a good life. I don't see that Christians are necessarily, at least in my circle, they're not bad people. They're wonderful people. I just believe they are misguided, and so was I.
Mm-hmm.
And so, over the course of my tenure, especially as I was a Christian broadcaster, I began to see things happen that I just could not reconcile with what I was saying on the air in my life, what I was speaking to. I began to see that, behind the scenes, Christian music, great people, but it was just a business. It was about money as much as anything else. I saw tragedy, the death of Rich Mullins, the guy's horribly killed by a semi-truck in the mid-'90s. I mean, a terrible accident, and people were saying, Rich Mullins, God called him home. And the entire time I was thinking to myself, God had his finger on the button. This was his master plan, to have Rich thrown from a Jeep and horribly killed by a semi-truck in the middle of the night, and the entire nation's in mourning. I mean, this beloved Christian artist, this is God's master plan. After the horrors of 9/11, I really began to question, what am I doing? And where I had come from, it was taboo to question God. You just didn't do it.
Exactly.
And I felt guilty. I felt like I was betraying my parents, my upbringing, my loved ones, my faith, my God. I just felt everything in me was crying out that you cannot do this. This is taboo. This is absolutely wrong. And I finally came to the point where I just thought, why is it wrong? Why in the world would God create a being and then punish him for questioning and not getting the answers? Why would an omniscient God create us all and then just decide that he is going to become the invisible man and make himself completely unprovable? And for the first time at the age of 40, I read the Bible. I mean, not just selected verses, not just little cherry-picked happy thoughts that we learned in Sunday school, but I read the Bible, and it was reading the Bible that caused me to realize that I was an atheist. And I'll tell you, when I said the words out loud, it was one of the scariest things I had ever done. It was absolutely terrifying.
Somebody else who did the same thing, are you familiar with the Skeptic's Annotated Bible?
Yes, I sure am.
Well, I interviewed him. He was one of the beginning shows, and he had gone.
It was a fantastic show.
Oh, he had gone to seminary, Catholic seminary, And then he read the Bible, and he had the same thing. And what really motivated him with the Skeptic's Annotated Bible was that his son decided to become a Jehovah's Witness. And that's where that came from. And there are so many, I grew up myself in a fundamentalist cult. And so I know that as I questioned, I had nightmares for at least 5 years wake up screaming nightmares. Because of the indoctrination. And so did you feel a lot of guilt as you made your declaration?
It was guilt. It was fear. I mean, I don't believe that Daniel Dennett has said that he endorses a policy where we teach our children about all of the world's major religions. We don't teach them that any one is true, but we just teach them what they are. And then when they are older, they're able to process those, and they can decide what it is that they do or do not believe because they have the facts. And, I think when you're 9 years old, when I was a kid, they showed us a series of movies, and anyone in their 40s and 50s might remember a very cheesy set of Christian movies from the 1960s and 70s called The Thief in the Night series, and it was about the Second Coming. And it was terrifying. People disappeared. There were news reports, and those who remained were persecuted, and they had their heads chopped off with guillotines. And they showed these movies to us.
Oh, I heard the heads chopped off thing. I can't tell you how that was a big source of my nightmares, actually.
And then they would have an altar call, and they would say, now, we didn't show you this to scare you into being saved. Who would like to come forward to accept Jesus Christ as their personal Savior? And you saw a mass of people in tears running to the front. Please, God, I don't want to go to hell. I don't want to go through the end times. And I think as a child, there's no way I can process whether or not any of that is true. I inherited the faith of my parents, and I will tell you that coming out has been a liberating experience for me. It has also been probably the single most difficult thing I have ever done. It has been a heartbreaking time for my parents and family who pray for me daily. Their mission is to rescue me. They consider this an eternal fight. They consider me hell-bound, and in their mind, they have to rescue me. They have to save me. And it's been a very, very difficult few years. And the Thinking Atheist website, really, and the videos came out of the fact that I was completely alone. I couldn't relate to anybody. I couldn't communicate to anybody. I couldn't really express myself. And so I began to produce videos that were saying the things I was thinking in the hopes that I would find kindred spirits out there on YouTube and in the internet who would say, I get it. And people have been amazing. They have been so wonderful and so supportive. And I get the occasional troll and hater and zealot, and I get the occasional threat. But by and large, I get goodwill and gratitude and thanks from wonderful, kind, intelligent people, and I could not be more grateful for that.
And what strikes me about your videos is that even if I didn't read your description in the side, I knew that you had grown up in this. Because you speak to it. A lot of times we hear this thing that, atheists are just rebellious teenage boys, and someday they'll get it or whatever. And I don't think that the average person who thinks that atheists are bad people or misguided or whatever understands the depth of questioning.
And there's a stigma. You say the word atheist to someone who grew up in a religious, even a relatively mild, liberal background. You say the word atheist, and they immediately, people shut down. It is a defense mechanism. I had family and friends who, when they heard me say the word atheist, they blanched. The word, my parents are both in their 70s. They can't process the word. They don't know what to do with it. And it has taken some time for them to know me and to know that I'm a responsible, productive, hardworking, loving guy who has a lot of friends and is loyal, and I'm not I'm not this monster. And they began to, all of a sudden the walls have started to come down where they have begun to think, well, you know what, I still trust him. I still would give him my house key if I needed him to wash my place over the weekend. I'd let him, help. If I needed someone to help pick me up on the side of the road with a flat tire, he'd be the guy I'd call. And people begin to see atheism now as a human experience in my circle. It's been a slow road, but it's slowly starting to happen. People are starting to accept me for who I am, and I hope that's the case with a lot of people.
I hope so, too. That is just tremendously inspiring.